Foreign investment, or as we know, FDI, is not merely a financial flow. It is a transmission of mechanism of technology, a generator of employment, a driver of industrial upgrading, and a key pillar of export competitiveness. In the 21st century, the world has entered what I call the global race for capital. Governments compete to attract multinational companies, regions compete inside each country, and even cities compete against each other. However, this race is not neutral. Capital does not flow randomly. It flows according to confidence, predictability, institutions, and territorial capacity. Emerging economies face a structural dilemma. For example, the FDI need to grow, and they often lack the institutional and security conditions required to attract and retain sustainability. However, in my work on the new determinant creation theory, which is a paper that I presented in Cambridge, do you remember, Doctor? Almost 13 years, I guess, 12 years ago in St. Catherine's College, in Cambridge. I presented, a research paper, which of course is related to the new determinant creation theory. There is a research that I prepared, for that meeting. And I remember in that occasion that I presented this new theory. That is the way how Mexico attracts foreign investment, including, of course, many determinants, for that. And it was amazing because, I have to, go inside, what was happening in the world about, foreign investment. And I found that it is not only, a matter of market size. It is not only about natural resources and labor cost and geographic location. There are many other determinants that are included in this investigation, such as, for example, skilled labor, tax incentives, industrial policy, legal framework, infrastructure. So it was really, really amazing for me to find out what was going on with the conditions within Mexico, and how the states and the country gets foreign investment from the world. And I found 10 different determinants, which of course you can see it here. And it is not, as I told you, only natural resources. Most of the theoretical work are focused on natural resources. But in my case, I found that Mexico, almost many years ago, created this framework to get money from abroad because it was necessary for the country. Especially because Mexico changed the political parties that were in charge in that occasion, and it changed the political party. So a new framework was conducted to attract these foreign capitals. And yet globalization has changed the rules. Institutional quality, governance, security, and innovation ecosystems have become the new generation of determinants. The critical lesson is this: countries that only compete on cost enter a race to the bottom. Countries that compete on institutions and competitiveness enter a race to sustainable development. A major component of my research has examined the relationship between political regimes and FDI. Democratic regimes tend to provide rule of law, policy continuity, contract enforcement, and accountability. Authoritarian and hybrid regimes, by contrast, generate regulatory unpredictability, concentration of power, and higher political risk. Mexico's transition from an imperfect democracy to a hybrid political regime created a strong negative signal for investors. That's been, about, 8 years ago when, the government changed in Mexico. This transition coincidence with lower confidence, higher uncertainty, and measurable declines in the inflows of foreign investment. This confirms a core proposition. FDI is not only an economic phenomenon, it is fundamentally a political and institutional one. So we have to change, if we want to get, more money from other markets, from abroad. My empirical work evaluating FDI across electoral cycles reveals a clear pattern. Different political parties generate different investment environments. Changes in ruling parties alter public policy orientation, regulatory stability, and investors' confidence. During periods characterized by pro-market governance, institutional stability, and international integration, FDI inflows increase significantly. By contrast, during periods marked by ideological volatility, institutional weakening, and regulatory centralization, FDI growth declined, as I noticed during the last 7 or 8 years in Mexico. This finding has international relevance. Investors do not respond only to macroeconomic indicators. They respond to political expectations and regime credibility. Insecurity as an economic variable. One of the most consistent findings across multiple studies is that insecurity operates as an invisible tax on investment. Using the public security perception index, created by one of the most important institutions in Mexico, I demonstrated that regions with higher perceived insecurity systematically attract less foreign investment. This effect is statistically significant across multiple models and time periods. Insecurity affects investment through higher operation cost, higher insurance and logistics cost, greater risk premiums, and damage to international reputation. Importantly, it is not only objective violence that matters. Perceived insecurity is equally powerful in shaping investors' decisions. Now, I want to move to state competitiveness, which is one of the main attractors of foreign investment. I use a special index, the State Competitiveness Index, also published by a private institution in Mexico that measures, competitiveness within the country. And state competitiveness is the single strongest predictor of foreign investment in Mexico. It incorporates infrastructure, human capital, innovation capacity, regular efficiency, governance, quality, security conditions, and so on. Even when controlling for GDP and insecurity, competitiveness dominates as the structural engine of foreign investment. So that means that investors are looking for, the rate or the level of competitiveness in order to attract FDI. This has a decisive implication. Investment policies that ignore competitiveness building will fall in the long run. So, states or provinces have to have to build, strong competitiveness determinants, as, for example, infrastructure, human capital, skills, and of course, a legal framework, and security conditions, etc. So in order to do that, you are going to get more foreign investment. So regional polarization and the Mexican territorial paradox. This is very important because I found that there are, a paradox within Mexico. For example, Mexico presents a striking paradox. It is one of the world's top manufacturing exporter. We have many products that we export, mainly to United States. 80%, 84%, of the exports go to United States, which is, of course, our main, partnership, because we have, the USMCA, we have, these big, foreign trade, agreement. But, the paradox is that if we have, this condition, I found out that we have a close relationship, but only with the northern, region of Mexico. What about the south? The south is excluded. So I found out that if we consider, this relationship with the United States, the most developed, provinces or states are in the north of Mexico. And the south, of course, it's, forgotten. They don't have, this kind of development. So I'm going to talk about, deeply, in a couple of hours, when I present, my paper. But I am including, this, in this talk, some findings. But let me go inside. Mexico presents, this striking paradox. As I told you, it's one of the main exporters. We have, many car factories in Mexico. We manufacture, we assemble, many, trademarks, around the world, like, from Asia, from Europe, from United States. So we are doing okay, it exhibits, several internal territory inequality. So that's the paradox. For example, northern and other region called Bajío regions function as a fully integrated nodes into global value chains. But for example, southern regions remain structurally disconnected, institutionally fragile, and chronically underinvested. FDI has therefore acted both as a growth engine, but also as a polarization mechanism. So I'm going to go into deeper, a couple of hours, later. Okay, what about nearshoring? As we know, nearshoring, there are some opportunities, for countries. The current nearshoring wave represents one of the most important opportunities for emerging economies in decades. However, my research suggests a warning. Nearshoring will not automatically generate balanced development. Without security, institutions, and infrastructure, and of course, a regional competitiveness. Nearshoring will simply reinforce existing poles of development. This slide shows, the main industrial poles which are located in the north of the country and in the center of the country. But the south is, of course, just forgotten. And what about, integrated policy, framework? From 2 decades of research, I propose an integrated FDI governance framework built on 4 main pillars, which is the institutional stability, public security as an economic policy, state competitiveness, and political predictability. I mean, I decided just to focus, my research in these four pillars. For example, in the institutional stability, that means rule of law, regulatory continuity, and judicial independence. About public security as an economic policy, not only policing, but territorial security governance, and state competitiveness, infrastructure, human capital, and innovation ecosystems. And political predictability, that means party alternation without policy rupture, and long-term investment strategies. But also, we have this technical, conclusion. FDI does not include only markets or wages. It follows institutions, security, political credibility, and territorial competitiveness. These variables interact in a cumulative causation process that reinforces success or failure. There is no effective FDI policy without institutional strengthening, security governance, and regionalized competitiveness strategies. National openness is insufficient without subnational capacity building. As I told you before, the real competition for global capital is no longer between countries, but between territories within countries. FDI can be a powerful engine for development, but only when embedded in strong institutions, secure territories, competitive regions, and politically credible governance. Thank you.